I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, June 12th, 2018 Finance and Operations Committee meeting at Nashua High School North at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to read the roll. Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ms. Porter?
Here.
Mr. Garino is here. We have a quorum. Mr. Mosher is joining us by telephone as he recuperates. Are you all alone, Mr. Mosher?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, sir. Also with us is Mrs. Dottie Oden, Board President, Mr. Donovan, and Lisa Gingras, and Sean Smith. So our first item on the agenda is scoreboards at Stello Stadium. And I'm going to turn it, I'm going to give the floor to Ms. Gingras.
Sorry. Thank you for having us this evening. When Stello Stadium was opened in 2001, the scoreboards that were put in are the old technology. They currently still have light bulbs in them. So they're the original scoreboards, so they're 17 or 18 years old. They get a lot of use. You do have in your packet a picture of the current scoreboards. And we tried to light up as many numbers as possible so you could see how many of the light bulbs are not working. As well as on the bottom picture, that black space at the top, it used to be a video board, and you can see all of the dents and holes and things like that in them. It has not functioned for as long as I can remember, even prior to me taking on this role. So we're at the point that the scoreboards are in really bad disrepair. The company, these are Fair Play scoreboards, and the closest company that will maintain the scoreboards will do any sort of work on them are more than 2 hours away. Is that correct? They're in Camden, Massachusetts, and we have to pay them from the minute they leave their facility. So it's not only difficult to get them here, but it's also very expensive to get them here. So we spent some time this winter and this spring looking at a couple of different companies, and the company that we are most interested in is the same company that recently replaced the scoreboard at Homeland Stadium. Nick Caggiano from Park Rec highly recommended this company. You can see from the diagrams there, anybody who has been to Homeland Stadium, you can see that they look very similar. So the new scoreboards would be, in the picture that you're looking at, the scoreboard on the left would replace the north end scoreboard. It's about the same size. We currently have 3 steel beams there that would support the same structure. So we're not looking at having to put in new footings, new steel beams, things like that. So that would be that scoreboard. That's sort of your traditional scoreboard with the set words and things like that on the screen. On the scoreboard, the only thing that would be digital is where it says Nashua and Titans. We can change those depending on who we're playing. The smaller scoreboard would replace the south end scoreboard. And that one is complete video board. It isn't completely digital. So what you see there is it is framed out sort of to represent the larger scoreboard. They communicate with each other, but you can have all kinds of things in there, very similar to what they have at Homeland Stadium, where we could put up, a graphic that says touchdown. We could put up a graphic that says goal. If on senior nights, we could put up kids' pictures. We have a lot of different opportunities there, including potential advertising within Stellos. And Mr. Donovan, Mr. Smith, and I have been down this road before looking at advertising within, and it is covered. We are allowed to do it as long as it's within the confines of Stellos. We can't hang any advertising that show outside of the stadium. So that piece is something that we intend to explore. is the advertising piece and the revenue piece to replace the money that we were asking to use for this. The company is reputable. They are, Mr. Caggiano from Park Rec has said they've been very responsive for any, maintenance or training or anything like that to come on board. The other thing about that smaller scoreboard is where it says Nashua underneath it, underneath the video board. That is also a new sound system that is part of this package. Because in addition to the updated technology in the scoreboards, the sound system is much outdated. So I think I covered, there's, Dan can probably speak to leasing options versus paying options and all of those pieces, but we have such a great facility that this upgrade to that facility would just be a huge thing. One other thing I wanted to mention is I did speak with the Bishop Girton athletic director, because the field is used by North, South, and Bishop Girton on a regular basis, and he spoke to his bosses, his supervisors, and they are definitely on board, willing to help pay in some way. He just, at this point in time, couldn't give me a dollar number of what they would be willing to contribute. So whatever they're able to contribute would go back into the Stellos Fund whenever they're able to do that. One of the other things that we had talked about is the video board is potentially involving our CTE video production class in developing, because it's all video, there's some lead time that you can kind of put things together. The way it was explained to us is it's very similar to a kind of a PowerPoint on steroids, I guess, is the easiest way to explain that. So they can call up different pieces, if there's a touchdown scored, or if there's a goal scored, or, if one of our lacrosse players hits their 100th goal, like we could have special things like that prepared, ready to go up. So having that ability to potentially involve them in part of the production of the video part would be really kind of cool.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add anything, Mr. Donovan?
Well, in your package, it does talk about how you, excuse me, how you can lease versus buy. But in running the numbers on that, the interest rates are probably higher than I would suggest we would want to do. If we knew at this point that we had built-in advertisers and we had people signed up for a 5-year deal, then maybe it would make sense, because we would take less money out of the reserve account right away. But since that, we haven't really begun that whole process, and I think that'll be our biggest challenge. And that we have enough money in the Stellos Stadium Improvement Fund currently to pay for this in cash. I think it probably makes sense, assuming it gets approved, that we pay for it in cash, and any funds we get from advertising, we put it back into the trust fund. I think that probably makes the most sense and keep the whole interest out of the equation. And we did see they showed us went out to the field one day and looked at the board in action. It's really cool. I wish I was a high school kid again. Not as long as you, Mr. Mosier.
You said high school, you triggered a memory of my math class.
So, yeah, I think this company also will work with you on getting some of the advertising going. And it's so slick that I think maybe we have a decent chance of doing this. But it's learning how to do it and then getting out there and doing it. And as Lisa had mentioned, we tried this before. We had a deal with a sign company, but then they were the ones going out to try to get the sponsors / advertisers. And they never sold enough to pay for the boards or the signs to make it worth their while, so therefore we never ended up doing that. So it would be good if we could get something going on that end. And the key is who's gonna be the person that kind of runs the advertising piece? Because I think it's a separate job unto itself. There's plenty of people willing to help, I'm sure Lisa and other people would be willing to help, but maybe something we need to discuss if we're gonna be serious about it, having a point person on the advertising piece of it.
Ms. Porter?
Would there be any local businesses advertising on the board? You know how sometimes there's stuff around the stadium that, you know, local companies, local businesses? Or are you looking for a mix, or?
No,
Big company can
anyone
be-
willing,
Okay,
yeah.
because that's kind of nice to support the local community up there on the board, too. Okay.
So when,
Mr. Mosher, go ahead.
years ago, when we had first thought about advertising, we had gone through a lot of the thoughts, and we had the committee look at it, and we had looked at these signs, and I don't think it ever really went anything. We had the signs that had a local company put them in on the field there, and I don't think it ever really went anywhere, because I never remember that it was any big deal, you know, because we had talked about the sign on the outside of the stadium, and the big sign on the outside of the high school, and things like that. And I remember that the idea of you know, just what we went through, just trying to figure out what we were going to advertise and who was going to advertise, and you know, all of the rules and regulations, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it never really went very far. But I'm thinking now, oh my God, it's got to be, it's got to be about 8 years ago, at least, that we had looked at the signs. And just never really went anywhere, and I don't think it ever made a dime.
Thank you, sir. Yep, go ahead.
I'm still kind of sketchy about it, because I remember when we went through to get the somebody, you know, to advertise, and it was something else. But I imagine there must be some company around, you know, like Coca-Cola or Pepsi or one of those that would be willing to do something, or you know, some of the restaurants maybe, you know, like the one up there in Merrimack, the clam barge or clam boat, wherever it is, and some of them that might be around, the larger restaurants might be willing to look into that as a place to advertise on a sign, and to have them, you know, sign a contract for it, so that you have the guaranteed income for at least a year. But it's kind of tricky though when you get down to the nitty gritty.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Ms. Oden?
Yes, I was wondering, what type of warranty is with this?
It was definitely something we talked about. I just don't remember that off the top of my head, whether it's in this information. But I know that they stand behind their product. I know, like I said earlier, that over at Homeland Stadium, there have been like a few things that they've come right out and either fixed it, or even over the phone walked somebody through how to fix it. Things like that. But we can definitely get that answer. I'm not sure if it's in the full packet. I don't have that with me.
Also, I'm looking at the map. There's a map, I'm guessing the darker colors are where they have quite a few installations of their packet, and there's a lot of gray. Does that light gray mean that they do not have or they only have a few? I don't quite understand the map, I know. Sean?
Yeah, if you had the color, you would see there's a, something like this, and that's just for the representative. So this fellow down here in the corner, Peter Reffenrath,
Okay,
has the northeast, and then, that's what those colors are for.
okay, thank you.
And if you wanted, we certainly can get the information to you about the warranty by the Board of Ed meeting when this would come up.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Go ahead, Ms. Porter.
So is there a service plan that's separate from the warranty? I know we get service plans on like our copy machines and things like that.
I don't think we have that answer either, but we'll certainly get it.
Because are those, I'm just asking, are those separate things, a warranty and a service plan?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I have a couple of questions. You have a picture in here, Stello Stadium Option 3. Is that what we're purchasing, or is that something different?
Nope,
That's,
this one here?
That's-
Yes, so
that's what we're
that's,
getting.
again, this scoreboard on the left-hand side, that's the one that would replace the scoreboard on the north end. And then the smaller one, this is the one that's the video board. So
Okay.
it's framed out right now to sort of to replicate, or actually it looks like it might be, it kind of looks like they have a football score, but they have shots on goal, which kind of don't go together, but
Right, right.
this can be framed out however we want it to be framed out. This would be the
Okay.
video board that would have the potential for advertisings and things
Okay.
like that. And, again, touchdown can go up or things like that.
I got you. So, yeah, go ahead, Mr.
There were several options that we looked at before we reached this point, and this one
Okay.
was the one that met our needs the best.
Okay,
So the
Yep.
ones prior to that, we just threw them out.
okay. You have a list here, a description and a cost estimate. And I totaled it, in order to get the total cost, you would just total everything down? Is that how you do it? So I got $133,028. Is that the,
Do you have the second page?
uh,
Because there's a couple more items on the back side, and
yeah,
there's a
what,
total
shipping,
at the bottom.
24,900 for shipping? On the back page, right?
Well,
Installation, actually.
Yeah,
Installation and
it's
shipping.
5,000 for installation, and
Yep.
then the others for,
Shipping and install, right?
right,
So that would be the cost of the scoreboard?
yes.
Okay.
Yep, the total is on the bottom of that second page. It's about 158,000.
Oh, there it is, down there.
Yeah.
My fault.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
I had a feeling you hadn't seen the other side.
Well, I did see the other side. I looked at the shipping, but I didn't
Yeah.
look way down here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. And one more thing before, I want to be brief, but Homeland Stadium has advertisement for baseball. So maybe we should be going to Silver Knights games and seeing what kind of advertising they had and who advertises locally. That might give us some ideas. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. And the other thing is that since we're going to get some of the students involved with the technical. Can we get students involved selling advertisement like Decker, or is that too much of a task? That's just an
I
idea.
would defer to the superintendent and the school board on that, but personally, I don't know if we want kids going out and soliciting, getting money for us.
Right.
That's just my
an
personal
idea.
feeling.
That's fine, yeah, just something, just a thought.
The other thing, going to Homeland Stadium, just be careful, because although our high school teams play there, there are advertisements there that are not necessarily appropriate for student youth-only facilities.
Right. But that might give us some idea who we can chase anyways.
Yep.
Okay. And I think that's all the questions I had. Ms. Porter?
When do you envision this being installed?
We're hoping by August.
Okay.
I think it's about a 10 to 12 week window from the time they get the final green light.
Okay,
We are required to have working scoreboards for football games, so we're kind of getting into crunch time, the first football game being August 31st. So it's kind of that's why we're here now, hoping, you know, if we get the go-ahead, obviously knowing it needs to go before the full board, hopefully at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then we're in a tight timeline, but we are hoping for fall.
Mr. Smith?
And I also think, maybe Mr. Donovan can correct me, but the Stello Stadium Fund, we have to get access to that, and that's probably through the alderman, right? I mean, it's not something we control necessarily.
No, I think we control.
Go straight to it? Okay.
Yeah, we can. The board can, if the board approves this, then the funds can be taken. We don't have to go to the alderman for this one.
Ms. Oden and then Ms. Porter.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions. Do we have any idea how much is in that fund?
Yes, 188,000.
Okay. And my second question is just kind of looking at this. You said you could put pictures up of kids. Is that preloaded? Is it a matter of if there was a camera and like the band was performing, or there was a close play on the field, that could be shown on the screen?
Not now.
Okay.
They don't yet have the ability in their video to do live,
Okay.
you know, showing the band performance, things like that. And high school sports are controversial and emotional enough. I would not want instant replay going up. But these are all things that sort of for lack of a better word, the production of the game all takes place prior to, so that you have like sort of your pick list, what you're going to pick from. For example, I know at Fisher Cat Stadium, yesterday was the Division I and Division II baseball championships, and we're notified the minute you make the playoffs. If you make the championship game, we need headshots of every single one of your kids prior to. So just like when you go to the Red Sox game, you know, who's up to bat, your picture's shown on the video board. I'm not saying we would get there right away, but, you know, eventually, once people get more comfortable with the video board, we could do things like that, like I said, for starting lineups, for senior nights, for special recognitions of students who have reached some pretty big milestones. But in terms of live, that...
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Porter?
When would you envision the CTE piece coming in? I think that is so exciting. Would that take some time, or would it start right in the fall?
It would probably take some time, and again, I have not spoken to our video production teacher, Mr. Leone,
Okay.
or CTE director, Ms. Bastoni, at this point yet. And I think hopefully we can get some training up and running prior to them actually being installed. And obviously with new classes starting and things like that, I'm not sure how quickly we could get to that. That may be something where we may get the students involved maybe for the spring season.
Perfect.
Once we're all more comfortable with how things work and things like that.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mosher, do you have any more comments or questions?
I have a wicked thought, but if you want to put a combat scene up there, you can always get the still shot on one of the committee meetings.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, sir.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
Sorry, another piece, and we included it in our memo, but failed to mention. The other thing about the video board is the rep that came down and spoke to us is some districts and schools who have it, some colleges who have it, have like video nights in their stadiums and things like that, because it just plugs into a computer. So basically anything that can be played on a computer can be plugged up onto that video board. So there's other opportunities to do different things like that with it as well.
Ms. Porter, go ahead.
So that could be maybe for elementary schools to have a special night over there, or middle schools or something. Oh, that's
Yep.
cool. Okay.
Mr. Smith?
Just one last thing. So this also comes with a very impressive speaker system. And in that neighborhood, it's a bit of a sore point for the residents, right? Because you have the elderly citizens right next to that place, and then all the residents behind, you know, the northern end, which is actually the western end. But this sound system will just direct right towards the center of the field and the stands. The people that are behind it will virtually hear nothing.
Oh, that's great.
So
Yeah,
it's a
that's
very
good.
directional sound system.
Yeah, that's an improvement, yeah. I think this is a excellent I think this is an excellent project here, because last time I went to a game was a couple of years ago, and I noticed the scoreboards. It definitely needs to be replaced. Yep. Did you have something to say, Mr. Donovan?
Yeah, I was just, when we saw the board in live, when you went in front of it and he cranked it up, and let's say we were 40, 50 yards away, it was pretty loud. But when you walked to the back side of the board, you could have had a whispering conversation. I mean, you can hear it, but barely. There's a significant difference between where it's shooting the sound towards the field and behind it. And since the video board's gonna be the one closer to where the homes are,
Yeah.
it's gonna be going away from them towards Mines Falls and down that way.
So, looking for a motion to replace the scoreboards at Stello Stadium for $157,928, coming from the committee members?
No, from the Stellos Fund.
Oh, from the
Stello Stadium Improvement Fund?
Stello Stadium Improvement Fund, okay?
Okay, so moved.
I'll second it.
Okay,
I'd like to make a comment here too.
sure.
Is that I think we had some policies from years ago that govern the original idea of the advertising that we could look at and see if there was going to be any conflict or maybe some information there that would be helpful.
Okay.
So we take a look at that. But
Okay.
unfortunately, we don't have anybody else from one of the old boards to help with the thoughts on that.
Yeah, we can check the policies online. They're all online, so everyone can check them. Yes, Ms. Gingras?
Just to address that, Mr. Mosier, that is definitely something that we had looked into the last time that we did it, and all of the advertising was in line with not only the school district policies, but also the city RSAs on what we can and cannot do at Stello Stadium.
Right,
That's good because I was on the committee back then, and I remember what we went through to get all of the details and the questions answered. Get the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and get everything squared away. So I know that the stuff is out there, so we could look at it.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Just in your motion, I don't think I heard that you're awarding the work to Scoreboard Enterprises, Inc.
Okay, we can add that in. Yeah. Purchased from Scoreboard Enterprise, Inc. Okay, so I think we're ready for the vote. And the motion is to replace the scoreboards at Stello Stadium for $157,928 from the Stello Stadium Improvement Fund, purchased from the Scoreboard Enterprise, Inc. Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. The motion carries 3-0. Thank you, Ms. Gingras.
Thanks
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all your work. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you and have a good summer.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have contracts. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I'm going to depart. I just wanted to advise you that we have put in for the grants for the other vestibules. So a total of 11 more schools put into the state for the Homeland Security grants,
Okay,
including front entrance to Mount Pleasant, which is like half $500,000, basically.
yeah.
There were some projects in there previously that were up to $600,000 that were approved for various security reasons. So I think it's a limited fund this time, but at least we have our fingers in the pie.
When will you hear on that?
I think they were still waiting for the governor to sign the legislation, actually.
Okay.
But I expect within a couple of weeks.
Oh, really? So we'll get a list of that in our packet? Or no, it won't be in
We
our
can have
packet.
one
We can-
for, yeah, in the future.
Okay.
It'll come through
At
this
some point.
committee.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll come to this committee, but I think those applications were put in by Mr. Lassard the last couple of days.
Right.
But then it's gotta go through the process. I think it's a quarterly. I don't think we're gonna hear in 2 or 3 weeks if we're gonna get those funds. I don't think it's gonna be that quickly, but.
Okay.
It's nice to know it's in process. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Lassard, I got an email from the woman at the state who sort of has been keeping everyone and all the business people up to date with everything, and she said, it looks like the 10 million is gonna be available soon, get your applications in. And at the same time, I receive about 7 or 8 emails from Mr. Lassard where he's already put them in, so he's
Oh, great.
he's right on top of things.
That's excellent. Yeah.
Because I think there is a little bit of, first come, first served to this thing.
Right, and we still had 2 that were pending having money, so hopefully those 2 will move forward then,
Yeah.
plus the new ones.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. So I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is contracts. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Donovan.
Okay, you have 3 contracts with the Adult Learning Center. All 3 of these contracts we've had for many years. The first one is a contract with the Adult Learning Center where they pay a minimum amount, $5 per day per school, to rent space at the schools listed, and there's, I believe 7 of them, elementary schools where the Adult Learning Center runs a before and after school program, sort of a daycare, let's say, for children that need to get dropped off early or need to wait for their parents to come and pick them up. So basically, this is the agreement we put in place. Like I said, it's more of a service to our families. It's not meant to be a big revenue generator for the schools, though we do get something. If in fact they need to use any special custodial services, they will pay extra for those. Typically, they don't really need to. The custodians that are working understand, okay, the program's here, we're not going to work that part of the building until the children have left, typically by 6 at the latest. So that is the first one. The second one, also with the Adult Learning Center, is Clearway High School. Now, there's actually 2 of them in here for Clearway High School. We have, the first one is for 15 special ed students. It's actually for 15 special ed slots. The relationship with Clearway and the Nashua School District is very close. Basically, what we agree to do here is to pay for 15 slots whether we use them or not. And basically, they use that funding to run the program. You will notice if you went back and looked at historical fill rates, the beginning of the year, we're not gonna have all 15 slots filled. We'll have maybe between, let's say, 9 and 12 filled. And then other students will filter in during the year. And we do have a maximum of 15. That, excuse me, that, if it gets to the point where we don't have a couple of slots filled and maybe a student from Litchfield or Hudson would like to do it, then they will charge Litchfield or Hudson and we get the money back. So this year, I just recently received a sort of a refund invoice back. So we did do that with, I think, 1 child and another one for part of the time. So even the amount that they're requesting this year for the 15 special ed students is $307,000. For the 15 students, that's an average of $28,000 a student. That rate, actually, it's an average of $20,000 a student, excuse me. That's a discount, a 27% discount off what the state gives as an approved rate for a private program, so that number goes up each year. That number's 28,000 that the state said. We get the 27% discount each year, so that's 20,483. So the total request for this contract for the 15 special ed slots is 307,000. That's a 2% increase on what we paid this school year. Okay, and then the third one is also at the Clearway High School. This is for up to 50. These are more non-identified, more typical students who find learning at the large environment that is our two high schools difficult, and they go to this school. Think of it as a smaller alternative school. It's worked quite well for a number of people. A year or so ago, one of the options during the budget process was to sort of eliminate this, and you saw a lot of the students come and say, no, 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 don't do that. This was what I needed. I couldn't get my work done in the environment that was so large. So that is this contract. That is the same price as this school year. There is no increase in that for this year. So those are the three contracts with the Adult Learning Center, 2 for Clearway High School and 1 for the daycare.
Ms. Porter?
On the first contract, on the first page, I'm looking at the schools listed. Are those the same schools that had those programs this year?
I believe they are, yes.
So Mount Pleasant doesn't have before and after?
They do have it, don't they?
I
20% free.
took over, no, because they had both.
Yeah, most of the schools have both. I will double check.
I wasn't there this school year, so I don't know, but I know that in the prior years, it's been there for quite some time.
It has. Maybe they left it off or they're not going to have it. I'll check it out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moshe, do you have any questions or comments?
Oh, I think it's a wonderful thing that what they have over there. I know people that have gone through the getting the diploma from the high school and everything. So I'm all for it. I don't have any comments.
Thank you, sir. I guess I have a couple of questions. What is the difference between, pardon my ignorance, but the difference between the first Clearway and the second? I know there's 2 different scopes of services, but one, there's 15 slots in one contract, and then there's 50 in the other. Do the students go to a different school or a different location?
No, it's the 15 slots of the special ed students, so they have
special ed.
many more needs.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
And the other one is just for the typical students who
Okay.
like the smaller environment, so.
Okay. Thank you.
And they're both the same thing, you pay for the slot. So basically, we'll take this number, divide it by 10, pay that amount each month. So if you divide the number of students that end up going there, the cost may be slightly higher than this if you don't use all the slots, if you're gonna do it by student. But really, the way to look at it is, this is what you're gonna pay, and you have the capability to use up to this much.
Right.
And there are, sort of plenty of students as far as special ed and the typical students who probably don't realize this is the place for them until after a few months in. And there are some students that will go there and then come back. There are kids that go back and forth for various reasons, so.
Right.
It's probably never going to be totally used at any point in time, but as the year goes on, it'll get close to the max numbers.
And we have, the total for the first contract is $307,259. It's in the scope?
Yes.
And the second one is $295,093?
Exactly.
Okay. Ms. Oden?
Yes, I was going to say, it might be wise for the board meeting to, you might get some questions as to what was the rate this year of slots being filled by our students. That might be good information to have, and that question might come up. So for some reason, I think I heard, and I don't know where I heard it, but I heard we had a good number of students attending there, that there were very few open slots, so hopefully that's the case.
Okay, yeah, I'll have that for the board meeting. I did do something on that back when it was a budget issue, so I could just update that.
Okay, so I think we're looking for a motion to approve 3 contracts to the Adult Learning Center, school age care contract, and 2 Clearway contracts, one for special ed, 15 slots for $307,259, and one for 50 slots for $295,093.
So move.
We don't need any amount for
I'll,
this.
I'll second it.
Okay, okay.
On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Porter,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. A motion carries 3-0. Okay, thank you, Mr. Donovan. Our next item on the agenda is the Technology Department budget summer spending, 2018. I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Donovan.
Okay, each year about this time, typically Rick Fahrenkoff, the director, he's out on a sick leave at this point, but he would come forward and discuss with the board spending. Now, these are not dollars in this school year. These are next year's dollars. So he does mention this money would be spent assuming our budget is approved and the below is approved by Finance, Operations, and the full Board of Education. So assuming this gets approved, we get it approved in June so that as soon as the funds open up next year for the budget, so in early July, typically around the 5th or so, they can put the order in, get the equipment in, because during the summer, that's when they have some of their summer help come in, and typically those are college students, and what they'll do is their job for the most part is to check every single computer, and any new ones that are purchased, they get them up and running, they place them in the lab or the classroom or wherever they're going to be placed, the library, et cetera. So if we wait until July to get this approved, you know, it'll be early August by the time they get the machines in. So they did go out and get quotes for the desktops and the laptops. Those quotes are attached. There's a summary on page 2 and 3 of the quotes. For desktops, they went to 3 different vendors, and the lowest price for basically the same machine. If you take a look, it's pretty much, it's got the same memory, it's got the same processor, it's the same model, HP, which is our standard machine, and the best price was from IT Insiders for $551 per desktop. And as you can see, the same process for laptops, with the IT Insiders once again with the lowest price of $630. The actual quotes from the vendors are below that, but I mean attached behind that, but that's the summary. So he would like to move ahead and have that purchased, you know, have it approved, assuming that the budget is in fact approved and we don't end up changing that budget line. If we change that budget line, then he'd have to buy fewer. Now, the second part is for access points. So he needs to purchase 2 access points for elementary schools, 50 access points for the 3 middle schools, and 100 access points for the high schools, 50 each. Now, when he sent this over, I said, well, there's no quotes on this. Basically, what was done here was he used the E-rate money. And E-rate is a federal program where the funds that you pay on your phone bill, you'll notice there are some taxes. There's 3 or 4 different taxes on each phone bill that you pay. One of those taxes is put into this E-rate pot by the government, and then they give the money back to school districts and other groups so that they can purchase technology. So basically, the way that this worked is he gets a significant discount. We're a 60% discount, so he gets 60% off the cost of these things by purchasing through the E-rate. But he has to purchase it through the vendor that he sent in the E-rate form for. So that happens to be Custom Computer. So Custom Computer is sort of his E-rate vendor. They're part of the whole process. So the good thing was, though, I mean, we can buy a lot of these access points. I mean, we can buy $251,000 worth of access points for $118,000. So it's obviously a good deal, but that's why there's no quotes on that. So, and then the wiring for the access points, he has an estimate of $20,000. I believe DTS is the one that's been doing most of our wiring in our schools. So that is the request from the IT director. He would like that to pass through, so assuming the budget is passed, once the fiscal year 19 funds kick in, he can cut his purchase order and move ahead.
Did you say fiscal year what?
19.
19? So this would be to approve spending for fiscal year 2019?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Mr. Mosher, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I have a comment. You know, I think that we have to call Rick Farrakop the wizard of the technology, because over the years, I know what he's done in getting the schools wired and getting the access points and everything that he needs through that fund, the E-rates. And what he has managed to do is absolutely fantastic. So I say that we approve this for next year and get it done.
Thank you, sir. Is anyone else? Ms. Porter?
Can you remind me, because I'm not sure I remember, once we purchase technology, it doesn't come with any service plan. That becomes the district's responsibility to maintain?
Yes, I mean, the computers have a warranty, so if something would have
Right.
happened early on but typically the upkeep of the computer is done
So
by
all
our
tech
internal
support is
IT
in-house.
staff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? So I'm looking for a motion to approve spending fiscal year 2019 for technology requests, 4 items. Custom computing access points, $118,320. For wiring of access points, $20,000. For IT insiders to purchase desktops, $232,831. And for IT insiders to purchase laptops, $46,296.
Okay, so
Bargain.
Bargain, so
Okay.
moved. First and second.
Okay. On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Porter,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. The motion carries 3-0. Next on the agenda is a Brentwood lease that was given out at this meeting. I'm not sure if Mr. Mosher has received it because it wasn't in the package. And I misplaced mine.
That was for the Brentwood?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay.
You're right.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Donovan, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, so the Brentwood lease, it is the 410 Amherst Street property. They sent us a lease about a month or so ago. I reviewed it, got back with questions to them. I sent it to Attorney Bolton at the city. He got back with many more questions, as an attorney tends to do. We got back responses to most of our questions. Some of the things were changed, a few things weren't. I'm setting up a meeting with them now so that we can go over the remaining issues. And I'm promised tomorrow that our risk management department to review the page or two of the insurance part of the lease. I've done a lot of review of real estate leases in my career, and a lot of them are pretty standard. There's a lot of the same things in there. But the insurance part is always the most difficult to understand. So we'll get our insurance experts, and we should have that response tomorrow. So I hope to set up a meeting either later this week or the very beginning of next week to go over the remaining issues we may have. As far as the significant issues, we're fine on the pricing, we're fine on the term. So the issues that might lead to someone backing out of it, I think are pretty much done. It's more what I would say technical type things. And there are, I think some of the things are where maybe our attorney said, well, I don't like this, you should try to get the language changed. But the chance that, the building burns down or something, and then we may not be able to, we could stay in part of the space but not the full space. There's some language like that I'm really not going to not do this deal because of something that probably is not going to happen. But like I said, we'll get the language best we can and we'll agree with it, and then so hopefully, obviously since the lease isn't here, I can't ask for the approval, but I think what we might want to do is maybe have a quick finance and ops meeting, maybe before the next board meeting or something, so that we can, and we'll get the lease in everyone's hands, they can ask any questions, and then we can get it approved, because even though the program is not going to start until, last week in August or whenever school starts, Mr. Smith and company need to get in to change some things around. It's not significant, the changes. They have told us that our staff can do as long as we let them know what we're doing, and we use experienced, skilled staff, which we do have in those areas. So I think we're close. It's just, working with a large landlord takes more time than, but I think we're close, and I had hoped to have it tonight, but not quite.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Ms. Oden.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say I'm glad that these students are back in Nashua. I think that's an important thing. Also, I heard from some of the people that toured the premises, the new facility, that it is very appealing, and it's a lot nicer, a lot brighter than what they've had. So they were impressed with what their program was going into. So, but it's nice to have these students back in Nashua, because it was Merrimack, but it was quite a ways up, almost to Manchester, where they were. So it's nice that they're going to be back here. So thank you for working on this.
Mr. Mosher, do you have any comments or questions?
No, but I look at the different buildings that we had considered, and I think that we're making a good move.
Thank you. Ms. Porter? Mr. Donovan, thank you for all your hard work. I know you put a lot of time into this. This has been an ongoing process, and I reiterate what Ms. Oden says. It's nice to have the students back in Nashua. Transportation is always a factor for families, so it's good that they're back in Nashua. So thank you. Our next item is May fiscal 2018 transfer requests. Mr. Donovan?
Okay, we will, as you see, there's a number of them. I'll just run through them quickly. You'll see the same sort of, the first few are all about taking, these are all funds, we give about 1.5 million a year to each of the, spread out amongst all the schools, and they use it to run their schools, their supplies, et cetera. At the end of the year, when they've taken a look and said, well, I didn't need as much paper, let's say, or I didn't need as much of a certain line item they had in the budget, they consolidate those line items and they use that money. And it's not as if they have, you walk into a school and you open a closet and see 20,000 reams of paper or anything. I mean, they're typically being very frugal through the year so that they have some money at the end of the year to spend. And they're spending on things they need. They're not spending it on filling up closets, et cetera. So the first few things are, the first one and the second one are both, they're taking some of their extra money and they're using it to purchase Chromebooks. So there's Nashua South is purchasing 3,300 worth of Chromebooks. Elm Street Middle School is purchasing 28 Chromebooks. Pennachuck on the third page is doing the same thing, Chromebooks in a Chromebook cart. Fairgrounds Middle School, same thing, Chromebooks. So that was sort of the first four. The next couple, the high schools have been crying about chairs for a long time. I haven't been able I haven't had much extra money to help them out. So they've been taking their end of year sort of extra funds and buying chairs. So there's a couple there from North where they're using those to buy student chairs. Actually, three of them, three in a row are for student chairs. And then you'll see Maine Dunstable, they're buying a few desks and chairs, $1,800 worth. We did have a little money for some of the elementary schools, well, actually for all the schools, for a couple of years. We haven't the last 2 years, but we did have some money at the beginning of the year for furniture. Since then, we haven't had any, but. So Maine Dunstable's buying a few. New Searles is buying 3 tables for the cafeteria. You know, that's another thing that people don't really think about too much, but the food service does not cover equipment yet. They'll buy the equipment for the kitchen, but they don't purchase the tables. Then there's one for technology, and they're basically just moving it from conferences that they chose not to attend, and they're putting it into computer supplies so that they can fill the bins up to keep the repairs going. Then there's one for Nashua North where they're just moving to buy paper and supplies. The next one is Ledge Street, same thing, they're buying paper. Then there's the Nashua Technology Center CTE program, and they're just sort of fixing some accounting things where they had some negative balances, and they're using the rest to buy supplies. Dr. Crisp is purchasing a bunch of agendas, folders, and a Quaver renewal. I have no idea what that is. Maybe someone on this Porter knows what a Quaver is?
I know what Brain Pop is, so I'm assuming it's another program similar to Brain Pop.
Okay, Brain Pop's a program?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, then there's one from athletics. Lisa's got all kinds of stuff, but basically she's taking some of her extra lines and she's buying some equipment. Nashua North Music Department is taking it from transportation where they had extra money and they're buying sheet music and instruments. North, once again, that's also the band uniform cleaning. And then Birch Hill is buying some language arts materials. And the very last one is North, and that's for the ROTC program. There was some transportation, and they took it out of their uniform line, put it to transportation. The thing with them is they get some reimbursement from the government, from the Air Force. They do send us money, but typically we have to spend it, and then they send it back to us later. So there's always a little bit of movement back and forth with their funds. So those are the transfers that, if you could just probably approve the whole report.
Okay. Mr. Mosher, do you have any comments or questions?
Going over the transport, everything is, like it usually is, and right on the money, so to speak. And no, I got no comment on it.
Thank you. So I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to accept the transfer report, May 2018. Is that correct, Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Did you second that, Mr. Mosher?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you, sir. On the motion, Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Motion carries 3-0. Okay, so we're going to move on to the May fiscal 2018 financial report.
Okay, so why don't we kill two birds with one stone here? So the spreadsheet that I handed out to you, that's the forecast. By going through the forecast, will be in effect going through the financial report.
Sure.
So this is, I'm a month late. Usually I have this for May, but at least we're there now. So we're going to start, if you flip over to the second page, and you look at the little box in the bottom. And you will notice that at the bottom of that box, it says remaining a minus 221,000. Now that is not necessarily a good thing, because it means we spent more than we have. But keep in mind that this is a forecast. It's a conservative forecast, I would consider at this point, not an ultra-conservative one, but a semi-conservative one. And the last couple years when I've done this projection in May and June, it's been negative also. So what I'm trying to do is to let everyone know that there isn't going to be a lot of extra money. We're going to have to wait until the very end of June, till all the payroll costs come in, et cetera, to see exactly where we're going to be. So I don't think it's a real reason to fret. We do have some other accounts that if in fact we ended up at this level, we could cover this, and I'll go into those a little bit later. But, so let's flip back to the front page. And if you notice the sheet, you've got the months across the top, and we'll be concentrating mostly on sort of the columns on the right side. We have June, then there's a summer column, then it gives you your actual year-to-date, which is a total of all the months. Any encumbrances that are currently in place, that means purchase orders that are in place at this point in time. And then it gives the remaining, how much is remaining in that account, and then the percent used and what the budget was. So, and if you look, there's sort of each group. So the 5100 series, which is all our labor accounts. According to this projection or forecast, we're going to have $11,000 left in our payroll account. Pretty small number. Now, there are a couple of big numbers, big projections in here. If you look at the June, if you go to the wages full-time, you'll see June, you'll see 8,730,000 and then 5,828,000. The 8,730 is obviously higher than any other month because that includes 2.5 million of the lump sum payment that the teachers get. Teachers can choose to get paid in 22 pays, 26 pays, which pays them through the summer, or 26 pays, but the summer pays they collect on their last paycheck. They get four paychecks. So that lump sum payment, about 2.5 million, is what I have for an estimate. That'll be paid in another week and a half. So I'll know what that actual number is then. I think it's a pretty good estimate, and then the summer number, those are the 4 paychecks that the teachers that get their pay throughout the summer. And most teachers choose that option. So basically, I've gone through, taken every single teacher, done the calculation and said, okay, how much do they make? How many more paychecks are they getting? And so that $5,828,000 is the estimate of at this point in time. So basically, if you look at that column, you'll also notice the remaining column. It shows a minus $1,298,000. So that's a little bit alarming, like we spent $1,298,000 more. But that's not really the case. Because if you look down at the bottom, you see that budget adjustments column, which is $2,066,000. That's the amount when we do the budget at the beginning of the year. If a contract isn't in place, we put a reserve in, an estimate of what we think we're gonna, and that's what's in that $2,066,000 number. So really, what I do on these payroll accounts to try to make sense of them at the end of the year is I add up the full-time wages, the part-time wages, the seasonal wages, and then the attrition number and budget numbers at the end. I add up all those costs and then compare that to all those budgets. If you do that, it's basically $400,000 under budget, okay, which is sort of more in line where you'd expect to be. You should never probably spend more money on payroll than you have budgeted. Either you started paying people too much, or you budgeted wrong. Okay, so there's always some people that don't work the full year for whatever reason, and so there should be some savings. And that attrition number, that's my estimate every year of, okay, we're budgeting, we make the budget in February, March, let's say, that's when we decide. We don't know everyone that's leaving until the school year starts, and it's the whole teacher leaves at $70,000, replace the teacher with the $45,000 teacher, so you get a built-in savings. That's that attrition number. So you really need to put all those together. When you put all those accounts together, it's a positive $400,000. So really, the accounts in payroll where we lost money, or let's say overspent compared to the budget, the biggest one is the retirement separation pay number. If you see that, that's the 51750. That's $284,000 we spent more than we budgeted. Okay? So one of the possibilities, if we're at a minus 200,000 at the end, is we have a reserve on the books for retirement pay. Because retirement pay goes up and down depending on the people that retire, how many of them, how long they've been around, how many days they had, et cetera, et cetera. So even though, and what happened this year was we lost a number of, in the summer, we lost a number of administrators that had been around a long time that were relatively highly paid. So we had a bunch of hits. So I knew this was coming, but like I said, we have a reserve. So my hope here is this 11,000 will be more like 111,000 when at the end of the month, because by the end of the month I'll have every single number except for the summer payroll. But I'll work with the city payroll people and we'll come up with a number for the summer payroll. So the next time we have this meeting, I'll have a much better. A much more accurate projection of what the payroll is going to be, because I'll have almost all the costs in as actuals. Mm-hmm. Okay? So last year, this is where we had some extra money which covered up our other areas. This year, it looks like there's not going to be that much. Part of that is because of the teacher's contract that we agreed to, which was a bit more than we had put aside in the budget. Okay? Okay, the next set of accounts, the fringe benefits, the three big accounts there, those are the accounts that the city adds to our operating budget. If those accounts are overrun, or if those accounts are underrun, we don't suffer the penalty, we don't get to keep the money. Those three accounts, they'll basically just move that back onto their books. So the only one that really matters in those set of accounts is that educational assistance account. And I'm showing we probably have about 30,000 left. We usually have money in that account every year. Most of this money is money teachers request to take additional courses, and a lot of times they'll either not take the course, or they'll say the course costs $3,000 because they want to make sure they cover it all, and it turns out it's only $2,500 or something. So there's always some money that comes back. Okay, the next set of accounts, professional technical services, not a lot of big numbers in there. The contracted services, looks like there will be some savings in that account. So the group as a whole, it looks like we're going to have $16,830 left over. Like I said, that will true itself up a lot more in the next few months. Then there's the next set, the property services. Now, the remaining amount there is $255,000, which is what I was hoping to get a number somewhere around there. It's really the accounts to key on are the first three, which are the utility accounts. It looks like electricity is going to come in right about on budget, right at that $2 million number. But it looks like the heating gas number is where we're going to have some savings. So that's going to help us as we get a little further down. And then the water, it's just running lower. I went back and looked at the last couple of years. We did budget it a little higher based on an increase we were going to be receiving from Penachuk, but it doesn't seem like it's really flowed into the total costs. So we should have some savings there. So that set of accounts, mainly because of the utilities, we should have $255,000 left. Okay, and then we move to the other services. I'll just key in on the main areas. The interesting one to me is telephone. We're going to overrun the telephone. Now, we did reduce the telephone budget last year, assuming that with the new phone system we would save some money. That has yet to happen. So that line in itself it looks like we're going to overrun it. I'm estimating, $11,000 in June, which if you take a look at all the other months, it's really not that high an estimate. So looks like that line's we're gonna overrun that line. And then we you'll slide down towards the bottom, the transportation accounts, regular and special ed transportation. Mm-hmm. Combined, one is showing a surplus of 327, one showing, in the special ed showing a minus 223. So in total, it's $100,000 in excess. I was hoping for that to be a little bit more, actually. If you go and look under the summer column, there's a minus 162. That's the entry that we get to charge for some buses back to the Title I program for the school choice program. This is the last year of that, so we don't get that next year, but we hadn't booked it yet, so we're booking it. It's probably actually hit in June, but so we'll see the benefit of that there. But if you look also at the sped transportation for June, it's 430,000, so it's a lot of, this is, and the reason why this is larger than most of the other months is it's a lot of the services that provide the long distance travel for the special education students. Let's say a kid gets moved out of their home, they get moved to Laconia, and we have to bring them back and forth to Nashua for the rest of the year. A lot of those kind of things start adding up, and those smaller companies sort of send a lot of their bills towards the end. So all in all, I think transportation will be okay. It'll be $100,000. Like I said, I was hoping it was going to be closer to that 162, but And then the big elephant in the room, the line right below it, the tuition out of district. As you can see, I estimated about 800,000 for June. We're gonna have a meeting next week to sort of update our student-by-student chart. But this gives a total of 5.435 million. The chart is at least that high. We did charge some of it off to a reserve account. But after next week, I'll have a better sense. But as you can see, if it's 5.4, based on what we had for budget of 4.7, that's $740,000. This has been a problem the last 3 years. This will be a problem again next year. I'm hoping next year, when the budget comes out next year, that we can increase this account so that this doesn't continue to happen. Kind of gambling each year, hoping that there's other areas that come out. If I didn't have this, I really wouldn't have too much of a worry. You know, but I always know in the back of my mind, I've got this big number that I've got to cover for. If we didn't have this, and we had an extra 200,000 and we wanted to spend it on something, you know, some plan that we couldn't get in the budget or something, we could potentially do that. But with this big number, it kind of cuts off any chance that we have any excess monies. So, as I said, I knew it was coming. That's the big number. That number will be firmed up, like I said, again, more next week. We should sort of know exactly where that is. Okay, and then the rest, the supplies, pretty much a lot of those are either supplies for Mr. Smith or supplies from the schools. They're going to spend most of that money, but there's always some left that falls out here and there, especially with sort of the plan ops. Sometimes they have a lot of blanket purchase orders where they go out and buy stuff, and sometimes all those don't get used. Now, another benefit I have this year is that indirect costs number. You'll notice that's a positive 76,654. That is, we get a certain percent of all the grants, and that money comes back to us. So if there's a $3 million grant, let's say 2.3% of that number, that comes back to us for managing the grant. So it looks like this year, I spoke with Glennis, the grant manager, went through it, and it looks like we got another 63,000 coming in. So that helps us out being over budget. It looks like we'll have 286,000 in that line, and we only budgeted 210. And then the equipment, most of the equipment, people are gonna end up spending that. There's probably a little bit at the administrative level that we won't spend, so I'm estimating about 11,000. And so that's pretty much it. The big negative number at the budget adjustments, that's where we budget the sports fees and the facility rentals, okay? So it looks like right now I'm budgeting that to be exactly, I think the sports fees are going to be slightly less than we expected. The facility rentals look like they'll be more than expected. That number could get a little bit better, but I figured I'd just sort of put it in sort of where we budgeted for now. We'll definitely reach that level. We may get a little bit more revenue, which will, once again, help with this. So, in summary, even though it's a negative 221, I'm not that concerned about it. In another few weeks, we'll have most of the final salary numbers, so I'll know exactly what that is. I'll have an update on the out-of-district tuition invoices next week. And even assuming it is that number, we do have a retirement reserve. I do have a special revenue fund that I can charge some out-of-district things to. So I think once again, we'll get there. I think the last 2 years, we had like $8,000 and $11,000 left when it's all said and done. Because the other thing that happens is people put encumbrances in, so the purchase order's sitting there. Sometimes the item never comes in, or sometimes the item comes in at a different price. But that doesn't get cleared up until, the end of July. So if there's it can't get any worse. It could only help. But it's not something I can really count on because it's just too late we're well into 2019 by then. So that's the forecast. Not surprised, kind of. I was hoping, like I said, a little more in the labor, and maybe in a couple of weeks there will be. But we'll wait and see.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Do we have any comments, Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, Mr. Donovan, we have to keep an eye on him because of his et ceteras, et ceteras, et ceteras.
Okay. Ms. Porter?
It's very impressive. You have it down to the last detail, so thank you. I can't even imagine how much work this was. So thank you.
It's the fun part of the job, actually.
Okay.
This is fun for you.
It is.
Well, I'm glad you're happy.
I'm glad you're here to explain it to us. I appreciate you going through it with a fine tooth comb for us so that we can make sense of it. Thank you very much. Okay.
We need a motion.
I think we're at the end of our, yes, we're at the end of the agenda.
Do we need a motion to accept that?
I don't think we need a motion
we?
to accept it.
No.
No, it's
Okay.
just a report.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we are at the end of our agenda, and if anyone doesn't have any questions or comments, any more questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Let's move to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
seconded. Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. This meeting is adjourned at 8:55. 57. 7:55. I'm sorry, 7:55.